All right, we are good to go. So this is the 28th, ContribX. Let's go ahead and just start walking through the agenda. There's a few other things that I want to do kind of at the end in terms of reviewing 1.7 and talking a little bit more about 1.8. And I also want to discuss this fix-it that Aaron and I have been talking about for a little bit, and I think I've mentioned to a few of you, and start doing that. But let's go ahead and start with George's first issue. Moving issues within the Kubernetes org?
Yeah, so I was doing a lot of, assigning labels and things like that. That's all fine and everything, but I noticed that it wasn't very easy to split something out from core into somewhere else. I was kind of hoping, seeing if anyone had any techniques or if people are just dealing with it. I had just discovered ZenHub and I'm trying that now, so I was just wondering if people have been running into this while they're doing all this cleanup work.
What's the specific issues?
What's that?
What are the specific problems?
Okay, so let's say you're in Kubernetes, and you find a bunch of issues. And let's say you look at kubeadmin bugs. You want to kick those out of core and go to be filed against Kubernetes/kubeadmin instead. In GitHub, you can't just say, oh, okay, select all these and move them. So you have to manually go file a new bug in the new thing and then close the old one. And I found an app that someone had hosted. You put both organizations in and it kind of does that. And I was just wondering with everyone, kind of talking about teasing things out of core and things like that, if that was something that this group should be interested in solving, or do we just say, hey, sorry.
Yeah, well, I mean, ultimately it's GitHub. Does the app seem to work well enough?
It seems to work for me for one-offs, but I did enough of them where I was like, hey, wait a minute, I should ask somebody.
I mean, it wouldn't be that hard to just write a script against the GitHub API. The big challenge would be, it could only be used by people who actually had permissions on all of the repositories, but that's true anyway.
Yeah. And then part of my question is is this going to be a problem in the future? Is it just, I don't know.
I'm sure it'll be a continuous problem. People don't know where to file the issues, and if they're new to the community, we can't expect them to be. Let me bug you later on. If somebody can temporarily get me the requisite permissions, we're really talking about like a page-long Python script. I
think we've got that actually already, Josh.
Yeah?
I just put a link into all the issues that were filed by Anaru against Test Infra, and I think, 6 or 7 months ago, we decided to move the MungeBot from one repo to another. And so all the issues, we wanted all the issues to accompany it as well. And so you look, he actually just did it all under his username. So all of them are opened by him, but it's quoting somebody else. So it puts the original issue out there in there. And I think he has a tool. I can actually just ping him and ask him for the bulk tool.
Yeah, there isn't any good way with the GitHub API to preserve the original person who filed the original ownership of the issue. That would require GitHub actually offering a new feature.
Right. But with the ones I was handling, I think just putting a SIG label on them ended up getting them triaged. But there were some where I was like, I don't know. It felt that I was doing it enough that I suspected someone had done this before.
Some yes, some no. Personally, I was using a /sig command to triage a number of them, which would notify the author and any subscribers, but not necessarily people who were on the various GitHub teams. So some SIGs have been more responsive than others.
Oh, okay.
The other thing is, this has come up for the examples thing as well. There are a number of examples that got kicked out into a separate repo, but only some of them have owners or maintainers. So it's like, what do we do with the issues that belong to examples that nobody has picked up? I think just in general, whatever solution we use, as long as there's a link back to the original issue, so you can lay a trail of breadcrumbs for whomever comes back and wants to pick up ownership of something. So as long as they can script it, scrape it, whatever, follow some sort of auditable chain, that's pretty much all we can hope for. Tying back to the original issue can be extremely important for historical context. Sometimes some of these issues have a lot of discussion that's just petered out, and you can't really replicate all those comments and whatnot. So as long as the original issue is linked, however.
Well, no, you can copy over all the comments.
It's true, but it's a lot of work. Some of them we have like, I mean, not like writing the code is a lot of work, but it's just a lot of calls to the API if you've got 200 comments.
Yeah, well, right. The other thing you run into is rate limiting unless it's somebody who's logged in under an enterprise account.
Yeah.
So but if we're going to be doing this a lot, that would be.
Yeah, the cross-referencing, the AppSpot one I used did a cross-reference link, and it did all the right, and ensured it, it pinged the original person to know that it had been moved. Like it did a good job. I was just wondering, we still have 4,100 issues if that was going to be something that, was going to be an issue for everyone moving forward.
TLDR, yes, I'm sure it will be an issue for people moving forward. Please share your experience with the community, and maybe we can make a recommendation as a group. In the meantime, the boring default answer of close the original issue, copy, paste over to a new issue with a link to the old issue, whether that be by human hands or a script that we have that we used for Munch GitHub.
Mm-hmm.
I guess on the other hand, we're doing really well though at getting SIG labels onto issues now. Whether it's the new bot that adds a comment asking for people to mention a team, or it's a change in culture, or it's manual triage. If you take a look at the issue count, I don't know if people have seen this recently.
There are a number of highly dedicated individuals. I know of a few.
Okay, we should probably call them out and say thank you, maybe at the community meeting or somewhere. I spent a decent amount of time doing this, but I was making progress at hundreds at a time, and it looks like it dropped by thousands. So I don't know who those dedicated people are, but that's awesome.
You can drop it by about 100 a day if you put in a...
Yeah, exactly. That's a couple hours.
So I don't have something, I just sort of anecdotally know of some names based on when my SIG got pinged. I was trying to find a way to scrape issues that had it and then no longer have it, and how that was modified. Some people changed the labels directly. Some people use the /sig command. I'm trying to pull that together because I do want to call that out at the community meeting. It's 10, 15, something like that. And the majority of them are flake issues, which I'm trying to.
Yeah, I see 15 that are just flakes, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, that was 1,300, I think, last meeting, maybe?
Yeah.
2 meetings ago. It was significant.
It was around 1,100 when I sent out an email to Kubernetes dev asking for, okay, I know clearly people have an opinion that there should be a SIG GCP, sounded like the consensus, but what's the set of labels we use in the meantime? So that was about 2 weeks ago. Yeah, that's pretty awesome progress. The question is, okay, now what?
Okay, yeah, let's start talking about that a little bit. And Chris, we'll get to your topic next. It just seemed to kind of naturally transition into this. So Aaron, correct me if I'm wrong, you were at the Leadership Summit as well. There's kind of a push towards, I think, letting the SIG sort of govern themselves in a lot of areas. And I think we're trying to not focus too much on top-down leadership and specifying these policies of you have to do this or do it this way. So I don't want to tell SIGs how they have to triage their issues, but I think maybe we could start to potentially define policies surrounding issue triage at the SIG level. So they have to be looked at within this period of time. And again, we'll need metrics and dashboards for this as well. But does that seem like a reasonable approach to define the policies and let the SIGs figure out how to do the triage themselves? Or should we come up with a suggested round robin, someone's a build cop per SIG each week or something like that?
Yeah, I wish I had a great answer. So there's a bug triage document that we wanted to discuss way down in at the end of the meeting here, which I think we should PR in as hey, this is roughly speaking what we use to triage. Although I'll admit I wasn't consistent in assigning priority labels because I assumed that was sort of up to the owning SIG to add the priority. I also took a broad swath guess at some of which SIGs own what. I tried to document that reasoning when I triaged off the issue each SIG will eventually need to make a charter that defines in concrete terms what it does and does not own. That should be one of the first things that's ratified by the steering committee when that comes into being. But again, that feels like that's going to be something that pops into existence sometime in the August timeframe, and people actually ratifying and defining and getting stuff merged, whatever, probably this September timeframe. So what we do between now and then, I think, would be those of us who've done triaging share our great learnings in terms of gaps or areas that were unclear. There are a couple SIGs that have a bunch of issues and a couple SIGs that have more clearly defined ownership. And so maybe like just at least starting a conversation with those SIGs about, hey, it seems like you have an awful lot on your plate. Does that make sense? To get them thinking about their charter might be one way of doing it. As far as owning a policy for like how things should be triaged, I'm less certain about that. I mean, we can make guidelines, but I like Caleb's values over policy, right? So like, don't be a dick to your users sort of deal. Like the low-hanging fruit is find the things that should have been support requests and send them off to the support thing. See if they've been answered if you can, but each of those things can take an awfully long time. Clearly defined support policy that says which versions of Kubernetes we do and do not support is one thing we could do. The flip side to that is to actually be responsive to support requests when they come in. So for example, there are a number of issues that are probably like aged out if we say that we no longer support Kubernetes 1.3 or 1.4, maybe once 1.7 comes out, right? Like I'm still vague on that. I think that's a good escalate to the community question and just use that as a blanket cutoff and then say, look, like when these support requests come in, you really do need to chase these down. Issues that haven't had activity in a long amount of time, they've already been like kind of pinged once since they had the need SIG label applied, they've been pinged again by people triaging them. If there's still no real movement or need for activity on that, probably closing with the reason for why it's been closed would be helpful there. And I feel like that's kind of really squishy and manual, but I think that sort of takes us towards the end of July with maybe a more reasonable set of issues that are lining up with various SIGs 1A roadmaps.
So you mentioned support requests. I think as a kind of a value that we've had or a policy, I don't know, it seems like the community has been, or the documentation I've read so far, it's suggested we don't deal with support cases. Like we want those to be in Stack Overflow because it's more discoverable.
Well, it's slightly more than that. I've always tried to provide a link to, unfortunately, it's not the most short URI. I swear it used to be like kubernetes.io/support or something really obvious. Now it's under like debug applications or something or other. But it does say like, before you go to Stack Overflow, by the way, we also have mailing lists and we have Slack channels. And if you're not getting answers there, then I think Stack Overflow is the next step. So I don't just want to be like a jerk and say, user support request, go to Stack Overflow, bing! But I do want to like, have you actually done your due diligence? Is this obviously just a question? Or have you done some amount of effort to tell us how to reproduce the problem? So on and so forth. Generally though, a link to the document as opposed to just a one-liner that says Stack Overflow done seems to be slightly more helpful.
Yeah, because the template doesn't mention that. I don't know if you've seen the template that I've been using, which I got from a page that told me to paste that in. So
can you put the template in the chat?
Yeah, 1 second.
I'm not sure which template you're talking about. You're talking about the auto response to support requests? Yeah, okay. I think I've seen that in like the troubleshooting guide before.
I mean, I'm really cognizant of the fact that as a percentage of overall interactions with this project, negative interactions may be small, but they might really stand out to newcomers. So I like to just try and make sure that my interactions are explained and that it's not just a full stop end of the conversation to make sure that people feel like they can continue the conversation, reopen the issue, just something to get a little bit more engagement if that's what we need. Does that make sense?
And all of this should probably be in the bug triage document, right?
Yeah.
What's the goal with that document? Yeah, okay to propose via PR. I'm just gonna cut this and put this up.
Yeah, that's what Zadev and I have been working on. But he's on holiday this week. That guide references this document when it's a support thing, and then it has that template in there. But this is what I've been using as part of like going through the SIG labels, which is why I don't know if you've noticed we've cut it down almost half the size it was before. Once we started to use it actually every day, I was like, I don't need to explain half this garbage anymore. And we were concerned it was too long and no one's going to read it. So.
Yeah, I think that's good. I mean, speaking in the context of V1.8, I have seen some discussion around opening up the user support role and making it just a non-Google thing. Because, like, context, okay, so build cop was a role that was held exclusively by Googlers, and it seemed to be like the person who had the power to shut down or start back up the submit queue, amongst other things, and do manual purges and stuff. In parallel, there was like a user support cop sort of rotation who was in charge of actually triaging all these user requests. That seems to have fallen off by the wayside. Fun fact, so has the build cop. That's sort of trying to come back up. And so SIG testing, we're really interested in making that build cop role something that non-Googlers can do. So like possibly trusted individuals who are trusted enough to have like Google project credentials to wherever the submit queue happens to be running, be able to log into whichever cluster running infrastructure, right? The user support rotation probably doesn't need nearly as much trusted credentials, but it does need some amount of trust in terms of having a good face or providing good interactions to users. So I think that like opening up both of those rotations as part of 1.8 would be a good message to send, that like we're trying to actually document these positions, give scripts, so that you pretty much just follow the doc. And George, I think by you hammering on that through triage, that's been tremendously helpful. And so I'd love to see that as a 1.8 goal for this group. You are muted.
Yeah, so what I did, even though by the third or fourth time you have it memorized, the goal was to remove as much information from it as possible to make it smooth. And then, so if anybody is still doing this active triage and wants to run through it a few times, so it's not just my strong opinion on how to do it, that would be great.
Thanks for all the work you're doing, by the way.
Say what?
I was muted there myself. Sorry about that. Is the user on-call support document that you linked, is that going to be in addition to the bug triage document, or do we want to combine those two into one thing?
So someone linked that we had this, and I felt, okay, I should just link to it to refer to something that doesn't exist. I don't know if people actually do on-call. Like, is that a thing? Or
I don't know the answer to that. That's something we should look into.
Yeah, like I didn't know, like is someone like, I haven't seen anyone mail a list and be like, hey, it's user rotation support time. Like I figured if someone was actually doing this. I mostly just saw the template and figured it was a good way for the obvious ones to reuse the work for closing issues.
Okay.
I don't even know who wrote this on-call user support thing. I don't know anything about it. I was just.
I see Aaron's comment. That sounds fine to me. Okay, should we move on to the web application that Chris wanted to talk about? Chris Luciano?
Yeah. So this is kind of further enhancements of this conversation. We were going through in SIG network to try to identify people that are part of different components within SIG network. So under the SIG network umbrella, you can think of things like DNS and the group proxy and whatnot. And with inside of there, there's different people that have different strengths, and just trying to figure out how to route both issues. And for reviews, we of course have the owner's file for assigning people, or at least trying to intelligently select people that should review this. But for issue tracking, we don't utilize that. So for that step, I was thinking of something kind of like the kind kube proxy, for example, and then trying to pick from the owner's file or a list for that type of scenario. And then kind of further enhancements on this is kind of like the brute force, like the web application. But ideally, I think even when we split everything into different repos, and then, for example, kube proxies over here, DNS already is split out, people are still going to Google Kubernetes, and land on Kubernetes issue page and file the issue there anyway. And nothing's blocking them from doing that, because that's just the easily discoverable link, unless there's something actually forced or put in place to try to have some sort of direction. For example, if I think that this relates to kubeadm, then I select the drop-down box of kubeadm, and the issue automatically gets created in kubeadm. We're still going to have to triage anything that gets past that, but I think this is a nice interim. It's going to require a significant effort, but I think it may be well worth it in the end. So that's kind of two things there. One, how do we notify for different components? And then two, how do we further triage things aside from just having some person every day go through and try to mark things?
So I don't know. One of the things I don't know if any of you use Bugzilla. Like, one of the things that I don't like about doing that is that it forces you to select all these drop downs that you might not understand what each of them mean before you file an issue, which can be both good and bad, right? Maybe you don't want a bug from a person like me who doesn't understand, right?
Yeah, that does make sense. I put that in at the end because, some of these things, like, it leaves me wanting like a Bugzilla or Jira or something, but then I realized that I didn't like using that when I worked with other systems. But I feel like if minimum things that we put in the issue template could easily be placed in just a simple web front end to try to do some of these things. And based on a lot of the metrics that we've collected on who files the majority of issues, they're people that are already members of the code base or significant contributors anywhere. I think it was like 75% of all issues are people that are like well known in the community. So,
right.
Let's say the majority of the time someone has at least a little bit of context. If not, then, like I said, there's still going to be a person that goes through and filters these things. But, the less that someone has to go through day-to-day basis, I mean, even if all of us on this call take 5, that probably won't suit the amount of issues that created day-to-day. And Morgan, yeah, the existing templates directly, yes, they should, but they don't. And time again, we've seen that first thing someone does when they click the create issue box is they delete everything that is required in there. And then someone comes back in after it's been triaged and asks them to place that back in there, like what kube version are you using, what operating system are you using.
So the goal is to get people to file more informative issues in the right place. Is that correct?
Yes.
Anything more than that?
Yeah, I think ideally once we split a lot of these things out, being able to find the correct people inside of a SIG for that individual component will be easier. But for now, we don't have anything. We could just say SIG network, and then the issue triager. It's up to the triager for the SIG to figure out who they think is responsible for kube proxy or network policy or something like that. So is there a way that we could have at least a little bit of this, even for the person that's initially filing issues, if they know that this person always handles issues of this sort, that they can put in kind something, and that'll help to triage the issue even further?
I see. I'm trying to think about this. Like, let's say that I've worked with Kubernetes a bit. I'm a user. I find some problem or some bug. First thing that I do probably is search for Kubernetes on Google, and I'll end up at the GitHub repo, right?
Mm-hmm.
So how do we get people to this front end before? Like before they click file issue in the GitHub repo?
This is a valid question because I was thinking in the end you could just disable issues and then it goes to this thing, but technically I want these to end up as issues, because else we're not actually using GitHub for its issues. We're technically reinventing Jira. That was one of the TBD things that I forgot to put in there.
Oh, no problem. Like, I want to flesh this out. This does seem like something that's pretty important, and it's going to grow in importance as we move to multiple repos, because we don't want people searching Kubernetes, having an issue with kubeadm or with Helm or whatever, and filing the issue right into the Kubernetes repo, and then sort of having to recopy. And then we'll definitely need that bulk copy tool or something, which is just going to be annoying to run regularly. If instead we could have people help, issue filers start the process off better, that'd be great.
Well, I'd say first we're up against the limitations of GitHub issues, but leaving that aside, my suggestion would actually be a two-pronged approach. One is, we have the new pick where your issue goes interface up. We get people across the Kubernetes community leadership to actually blog or otherwise put that in social media in order to boost the Google rank of that. And just remind, because part of Google rank is how many people have referred to something. So get that URL all over the place, and then put in the templates for the various projects. Hey, did you come directly to this project, or, did you know about our issue filing interface? If you don't use this issue filing interface, it may slow down the response to your issue.
Yes, and I forgot. I thought I read something that GitHub recently added some sort of support for who could actually file issues. So potentially you could close down the issues, say for the bot that is responsible for creating them through the web interface. So you can still refer to them, but you can't create them. This is kind of no different than what we have for like the merge queue now with the K8 spot.
I have a difficult time if the Kubernetes project is dedicated to GitHub that we don't use all of GitHub. I fully understand that we are bumping into a significant amount of limitation in GitHub's issue management. It hasn't been really adequate for us for quite some time. But I am concerned that using something other than GitHub will not fly with the steering committee. So I'm trying to figure out, in this brave new multi-repo world, we are likely not the first project that has had to deal with this particular problem. And I would be interested in a survey of what other projects have done as prior art. I mean, if the survey is, guess what, they all use an external issue management system, maybe that would be better evidence for the steering committee. And I think that, just trying to think of something that stays purely within the confines of GitHub, you could have the bot or a human be more aggressive about shutting an issue down if it doesn't conform to the template. We're trying to make the template as easily and simply understood as possible. You would hope that you can have it be machine parsable or something and have the bot explain that, as opposed to what happens now where people don't really file a useful issue and so it's just straight up ignored. It might seem unfriendly, but they would get faster feedback if the bot's like, nope, not enough information, it's not the information we asked for, closed. Right?
Yeah.
Not friendly, but it would be more immediate feedback if nothing else.
By the way, if we're looking for code for a bot, Docker's actually got a pretty nice issue triage bot that they call Gordon the Turtle for Docker reasons. But in terms of like projects that have a whole lot of GitHub repos, I've never actually seen this dealt with well.
Most of the larger projects seem to have spun off their issue tracking, but let's not go down that road yet. I think, Aaron, what you're getting around to is if we just make the bot be a little bit more hardcore when it comes to validating input, I guess, right? If we just ratchet it up a little bit and then see what happens.
Yeah, I mean, the horrible extreme would be like, fill out this YAML blob, right? Because that's parsable and that's kind of human readable, but like, I understand that there are a ton of limitations of GitHub, and this is all about like how do we do way more than what GitHub offers right now. And so I don't really have a great answer. I'm just cautioning that I suspect the steering committee is going to say like either we're all in GitHub or not. And so at least a constructive thing we can do is attempt to document the requirements we want, like where is it precisely that GitHub is deficient for us, and so we can be able to articulate what is this thing we might want to bolt on or use to circumvent GitHub system. Because I also think of it from the perspective of what if there was something like GitLab or some other solution that we could ultimately move to if it met all of our requirements. Because this is but one of many areas where GitHub is deficient for this project. And if we could find something that fits that a little bit better, again, maybe better wait for the steering committee to make that kind of large decision. But okay, I'm seeing some nodding of heads on the bot being hardcore. Like I said, for me, again, it comes back to like, what's the user's first interaction with the project?
Yeah.
So at least if the bot could close and link to an example of something that's been filled out well and that describes why, right? Something at least a little user-friendly.
Yeah.
Right, or even if you do close it, if you explain it. Look, I had to close this because it's missing these things. Before a human looks at this, we're just trying to be efficient. Please click here and follow these things out. Thanks. At least explains to the person that it's nothing personal, right? And that, yeah. The new issue template is also got merged 2 days ago, I think. I don't know if it's live yet.
I think so. Is that the one that tells people to use /kind instead of answering a question for a kinder feature or bugger feature?
Let me see. I wrote it and I forgot what it does. I'll actually file a lot of new issues. Here we go.
I mean, the risk with having the bot be super strict is there's only so much engineering effort we can have to crafting the most friendliest error message that says this is the specific thing that you messed up on. And at some point, you don't want to go writing a compiler for an issue template. But at least being able to link to an example, having the bot be a little bit more aggressive in closing issues, and having some kind of role where humans do survey the bot's decisions to understand, did it actually close this correctly? Is this a real problem? Et cetera, et cetera. I just feel like that would still be a little frontier than our invisible ignorance of issues that aren't right.
Yeah, and even if it said, hey, if this is a mistake, here's a list of ping or whatever, because I'm sure we'll get some of that, right?
We need some exceptions for people who are using issues for development. What I've generally seen in that way is that issues are tagged with like WIP or discussion, or something else to indicate that they're not going to conform to the template because they're there as, say, discussion items.
Yeah, or maybe make it that, I don't know if there's a way we can figure out, but like after you've been around for a while and you kind of know how things work.
Yeah. Well, the other thing,
we only show new users or something.
Yeah. The other thing would be to have the bot check the list of owners of the SIG and obviously exempt them from any of this, because we don't want to be telling the committers, hey, you have to conform to the template.
Right. You forgot to fill out your OS.
Yeah, I actually wanted to remove the Bugzilla. I regretted putting it in there, but I wanted to just use it as an example. By no means do I think that we should operate outside of the tools that we have. Just looking at ways to enhance, so to say. And then if we do aggressively, close down, at least someone can then just be mad at a robot instead of an individual person. That kind of helps a bit. The other thing is, similar to what where it's put at the bottom, what are the kind things used for? Because aside from just sorting on them, is there a way that we could, teams I think are mapped to individual like SIG network labels, assuming that you actually know what the team is called. Can we have the similar process as in create more teams for individual components within, or would we rather have owner list files for bug triage for individual components within the code base, or both?
It's a really good question. I wish I knew what all the kind labels were for. There are way too many of them, in my opinion. We have owners. In an ideal world, all the code would be hierarchically organized into directories where the owner's files correspond to the SIG or set of people who care most about that code. But that works great for pull requests, not so much for issues, since issues are just, I'm talking about a thing. I don't really know which piece of code specifically I'm talking about right now. I think that's a great broader discussion to have.
Yeah, and I imagine like this would be more of like the SIG triager themselves now, further triaging it to who they believe is responsible for that. I don't imagine the original author of the issue would be adding these unless they actually did know. But how, aside from just assigning the names and the person triaging within the SIG being involved with the project long enough that they know the exact names, how can you further?
Yeah, I don't really know. There used to be component labels at one point, I think. There are also aliases. You can use an owner's alias file, but again, that's code-centric. That's not issue-centric. The concern is if each SIG gets to create its own set of labels for the subcomponents that it owns, but every SIG is still living in one big tree, we're going to explode from the 160-something labels we have now to something even larger.
Yeah.
Sound like the best direction, but maybe that is like things have to get worse before they get better. I'm not sure.
Yeah, and I kind of just want to use the labels that are there, like kubeprox is there, kubectl is there, but they're only really used if I want to sort within GitHub issues for all of those things.
Sure, right. My mental map tells me kubectl is SIG CLI, kubeproxy is SIG networking.
Yeah, I actually at one point I tried to put together like a spreadsheet that had like areas on one side or components on one side and SIGs on the other side, and just put an X where there was that intersection where that mapping was. And I couldn't get complete SIG buy-in. Maybe I'll share that with the group. I don't think every SIG participated in that, so it's like a partially filled out matrix. But that's what you were talking about with that mapping earlier, because I think most of us, that's how we triage issues. So we're like, okay, we're talking about the scheduler that probably fits under the SIG or something like that. I see certain keywords. All right.
Yeah, that sounds good. I don't know. I like throw that into the bug triage document, roll that grenade out there, and see what happens.
I've got a little section that's my notes. These belong to these, because I'm starting to find things that, like, who do the vagrant boxes belong to? Like, I've asked that all week.
Oh yeah, God, that's cluster lifecycle, but nobody within cluster lifecycle.
Yeah, they're like, no, that's SIG release, right? So like, I think there's people to like figure it out, right?
Yeah, and like pretty much all the things inside of the controller manager are all central functionality, but which SIG owns which controller, blah, blah, blah. All right, sorry, people are going to move us on, Gary.
If we can find gaps like that, like the vagrant boxes, it might be good to try to compile those for, a month or whatever, and then bring that as an item to the community meeting and say, hey,
Because
Here's
I think a lot of these
things
right, a lot of
project
these
does that nobody covers.
Yeah, like they have to. I think the whole point of the charters and stuff is to sort that out, right? I'm asking that as a question, not as a statement.
Yeah, but the thing is, we're going to encounter stuff more situationally, right?
Absolutely.
We're trying to figure out where an issue belongs.
Right.
Because it's really hard to look at a set of charters and figure out what's not covered, right? You can figure out where overlap is, but it's hard to figure out what's not covered. But when you have an issue and you say, hey, there's an issue with a vagrant box and no one will take responsibility for it, then you know an area that's not covered.
All right, we should probably get moving.
Yeah, let's move on. There's a few other things that I wanted to talk about. Elsie and I reviewed the 1.7 planning, and we had kind of 4 major themes that we wanted to address: consistency, automation, docs, and metrics and feedback. We did a few things pretty well. I was looking through on the consistency side. There's a PR that got open to move a standard subset of the labels. I think there was some discussion about which labels should be moved to all SIG, to all repos. I think we said we'd start small, but it ended up getting stuck at some level, and I need to follow up on that. I know the guy who was working on it, but I think he just had problems getting it to run in Prow as like a regular job. We did do some work on bot consistency. I know I've seen a few things that have changed the command so we don't have the @kh bot, or that might still work, but we suggest you start using like /OK to test, and that way we're just a little bit more consistent across the board. And those are updated in the docs as well. So I think we did well there. As far as automated or automation, so pinging inactive reviewers. Yeah, this had a lot of discussion about whether we should reassign, and some people were strongly opposed to having the bot reassign automatically. I think it ended up being that the bot would find additional reviewers for you and reach out to the author and suggest that the author ping that person individually or assign them themselves, just so that we can add people and make it have more human involvement. But that is done. Our templates got updated. I think the feature repo template got updated. The main issue template in Kubernetes got updated. Thanks, George. And did I jump one? Yeah, I jumped one. Okay, so I also thought about the auto triage. Sorry, I jumped a few. Automatically triaging issues. We need to review this a little bit better. I wanted to talk to the TensorFlow team. We could probably talk to Docker just to understand how like Gordon works, or what our approach should be here for auto triaging. But it looks like this isn't actually the biggest issue right now. It looks like the bigger issue is getting SIGs to handle them once they have been routed to a SIG. Yeah, we still have some trouble with visibility into the minor releases. I think the SIG release team is working on this, and I know Don put some effort into asking that all PRs had associated issues. Whether or not that was immediately helpful remains to be seen. But there's work that's been going on there. And
hey, Garrett, can I bring one thing up about that? Because there was an unresolved issue that we had about that was really vexing. That's as we split out repos and issues start popping up in other repositories. Seems like we're going to have a ton of duplicate work for contributors to enter in those issues in, say, the cloud provider repo in Azure, or in for GKE, or you know what I mean. It's going to be spread all over the place. So do we have a plan for how we want to approach all this cross repo linking for releases?
So I'm not sure that I understand the issue, because I think PRs could link to an issue in any repo. It wasn't that it needed to be a Kubernetes issue. If you created a PR that was going into the 1.7 branch, they just wanted you to reference an issue. So it could have been in a totally separate repository. Is that what you're asking about?
Yeah, but the experience I had was that wasn't the case, that it actually had to be in Kubernetes.
Okay, this is something we should probably discuss in the 1.7 retrospective. And I think there's a number of stakeholders here, right? SIG PM really strongly wants more visibility into the releases. From our perspective, we don't want contributors having to write, make it more painful to get a PR submitted. So yeah, we need to talk about this and kind of understand the problem a little bit more if this worked well.
Okay, I'll add that to the 1.7 retro doc, which, by the way, I'm going to send out something soon that we need to schedule that sooner than later.
We can see, we've got some tooling around the release notes. I don't think that's going super well. Sorry, Aaron. I think it's kind of back to where we are, and we need to evaluate that and maybe enforce. I'm kind of at a loss for what we can do there. I don't have enough experience doing it. I think it would have been like maybe it's something I need to be more involved with, so I understand the problem a little better. But I think
retrospective, and we should totally discuss it release notes or at SIG release for sure.
Okay. The big thing from 1.7 that I think we've yet to achieve well is metrics and visibility into the project's health. I still think there are a number of tools out there, including the Submit Queue, including Velodrome, including Sappho now, including Liturgia. There's so many dashboards, and they still don't. They don't answer all the questions that we'd like, around PR velocity, and it makes it hard for us to understand the impact of various policies. So, the new bug triage policy is actually helping us reduce the number of open issues, or the speed at which issues are closed and how fast PRs are reviewed and things like that. So for 1.8, that was one of the things that I think we could really stand to work on and improve on. And I guess on that note, maybe we can talk a little bit more about what we want to do in 1.8 if other people have ideas. I think so. The bug triage is probably something we want to close out. Issue triage is there, metrics and project health. Is there anything else? I've got flakes written down here, and Aaron, I think we had talked about like test flakes. I talked with Eric Feishta about having dashboards in test grid so that it was clear which SIG owned every test. Every test was owned by a SIG. And this is something that can be done kind of in an automated fashion. Apparently Ryan Hitchman is just working on this. I thought I would get every SIG to kind of identify which test they own, but he's got a mapping already from test prefixes to SIG names, and he can use that to auto-generate dashboards, which I think will be nice.
Yeah, that's still a little wonky. There's like a test owner CSV file, and then he's got a script that can like scrape that down to the set of common prefixes that you can then, this SIG owns any test that begins with this word, and then that can be used elsewhere to generate stuff. We had talked at one point about like dropping the SIG name itself into the test text or the test case name. I'd like to avoid that if possible. I really need to work on my names. Folks came by and demoed Test Grid at SIG Testing yesterday and showed off a number of features that are really cool, one of which was the ability to show additional metadata per row in Test Grid. So if we could find a way to attach SIG ownership without stuffing it in the test name, Test Grid can use it from that perspective. And I know that having a dashboard for each SIG generated in an automated manner is very much on SIG Testing's roadmap. But all of that test data is ultimately like the triaging stuff that Ryan was working on that you were talking about is driven by like manually human curated CSV file. Finding a way to make that better would involve, I believe, structuring the test code into directories with clearly defined owners files that use SIGs, not names. Because to tie back to the bug triage thing for a second, like one thing I would often do is try and go find the relevant piece of code and then look at the owners file in the directory, and that would usually give me usernames, and then I would use those usernames and go search the Kubernetes organization and find out which teams they belong to, and then from those teams reverse engineer probably which SIG I should ping, right? I'd love to see those owners files start to include a more direct mapping to SIG, if at all possible.
So even beyond an owner's file, he was suggesting that every single test source code file just have a comment, and we can enforce this pretty easily, right? Like a bot that auto checks for this comment that said, owner equals this SIG.
That'd be awesome.
Yeah, so I'm totally fine with that. The directory structure is fine with me too. But either way, just having it super clear which SIG owns each test. And if a test isn't owned, then say like, okay, well this test's not going to pass. We're going to release without this test. Is everyone clear on that? And are we okay? We need to it needs to come to light which tests are, where the ownership lies and who I can actually bother when it's failing.
Right. So that's the super granular level. To take it up a level higher, there's which jobs do which SIGs own. So right now, the defined signal, go-no-go signal for release, right? People go look at test grid, and there are a bunch of jobs that have red and green boxes for them. So I'm talking about the jobs themselves, not necessarily each of the rows that pop up when you click on a particular jobs tab in test grid. We added the fields for those. What we need to do now is go chase down SIGs and get them to actually sign up to own jobs. So, for example, the SIG release team would probably own the build jobs. The SIG node team would probably own all of the node E2E test jobs, things of that nature. Where it's going to get a little trickier are the slow, flaky, disruptive job reboot, upgrade jobs, right? Finding SIGs for those, but that's another way that we can, at the job level, not necessarily which individual test case happens to be flaking, but maybe we can drive SIGs that way. The question is if that's going to be higher signal or more value for less effort. But that's another tack we're trying to take.
Okay. And then the last thing that I kind of wanted to talk about was this fix it. So it was related to what we were just talking about for that test ownership, but it seems like a lot of that can be automated, and SIG testing might just be able to take care of it. Fix it work, just in case people haven't heard this term before. It's something I think the Kubernetes community tried last year, maybe has tried one other time since then, is generally something that can be parallelized pretty easily, kind of mechanical work, and things that people say, it's not that important. Well, I'd rather be working on a feature right now if given the choice. So we're not going to force anyone to participate into this, but we're going to try and make a community-wide effort. And Google is going to make a team-wide effort, at least, to focus on cleanup and to what's the term that Tim Hawking always uses? Carry water. Chop wood and carry water, sort of things like that. That being said, some of the mechanical work or the things that I had come up with seems like they can be automated pretty well. Do we have ideas for things that could strongly benefit the contributor experience that we could use 120 or 110 or however much manpower for a week's worth of time to get done? I'm looking for ideas here.
I don't have a specific concrete example, but I think you alluded earlier how it'd be great to measure some of our goals before we actually go off and try to accomplish them. So if our goal is to reduce issue latency or issue closure or whatever by X, what is it today? So I think there's a bunch of big query data available now. But somebody's got to sit down and experiment with coming up with the metrics and then crafting the queries to do those and then finding a way to display that and see if that's meaningful. I think that'd be useful. I don't know if that's boring mechanical work that we've been putting off for a while that would deliver high value immediately, but I do have this vague concern that we have often just gone and implemented the policy first and then hoped that it did good things later.
So I agree, but is that parallelizable? Can we get small groups of people working on this or individuals working on this? And how what's the format that we want there? I like the idea. Anything else? The last 2 minutes, do other people have ideas as well? Because I love the metrics idea. I'm 100% for it.
Can we follow up right after this meeting on the Slack channel about the metrics? Because I have some questions, but we're going to run out of time.
Yeah, that sounds reasonable. Yeah, go ahead. Just SIG ContribX Slack channel. Other topics? All right. Well, I'll also probably make a request on the Slack channel looking for more topics there. I think we are just about out of time here.
Sorry, for just following up from the last part. For the kind X and or mapping teams to auto-responding to those types of things, would a mailing list post be better for discussing that type of stuff? And if so, should I keep it within TribX or put it directly to developer since it's kind of cross-cutting? Developer? Okay, got it.
If you want to like craft a bolder suggestion, you can keep it to ContribX, but I think getting a broader audience would be helpful.
Sounds good. All right. Well, thanks everyone for joining. We'll see you in a couple weeks.
Thanks, Garrett. See ya.